subsidizing that as well. That's a cost that this should be borne by the companies themselves. So now we get to the part where we get to have the discussion. Rather than just flipping it up and having people whenever we listen to individuals, we'd like to have it more as a dialogue, as I mentioned before. And so what we've done is we set up 3 stations in the room, and they're primarily identified by where you see the poster boards that we put together in the 3 corners around here. And we've got state agency staff that have participated in this process, that have generated this information, and have participated in the ACES program that will be at these stations to first give the group that starts out over there an overview of what information is being provided at that station, and then engage in more of a give and take discussion of the issues that you're interested in. And then the expectation for us is that folks will then move about every half hour or so between the stations if they are interested in moving between them. And the people that are at that station will give a brief overview every half hour of what's there for the folks who have arrived. And again, the way that we've struck these stations is looking at what we think are some of the key issues that are facing the legislature as they look at the ACES package. The primary question is, does ACES strike a fair balance between the industry and the government? This is something that is clearly at the heart of the discussion that's going to be going on down in Juneau. And the first question, when we look at the 2 components that we believe make up that question, is can Alaska compete with other oil and gas regions around the world? And in the far back of the room back here is the station that will discuss different methods of comparing Alaska to these other regions. And just recognize that it's very important to understand that when companies are looking at investment opportunities, they're not going to just look at what state or what nation or oil and gas area is going to have the lowest government take. Because if it doesn't have any oil and gas, it doesn't matter whether that take is low or not. If there's an unstable government that's going to turn over in a year or nationalize your reserves in a year, it doesn't matter what price they're going to put on it. And so you have to look at these things in the context of all the other features that attract companies to a particular area. And so what we have back there is both the economic numbers of how Alaska's share, how Alaska's take under ACES and under the current situation compare, and also some of the other factors that are going to be looked at by companies when they compare elsewhere. The next station, number 2, is does Alaska preserve does ACES preserve Alaska's investment opportunities? This is the analysis that I described where we looked at particular fields and the information that we had in terms of the costs associated with developing that field, what kind of production levels they're going to have, or the reserve base, how is the cash flow going to be generated out of that field? And then what happens when you impose different tax structures with different impacts on both the cash coming in and also credits going at the very beginning, getting the money to the companies right off the bat, because those are all going to have a different impact on different fields depending on how quickly they're expected to get the oil out of the ground and how much it's going to cost to begin that production. And so what you have back on this side of the room are charts associated with that analysis that was done looking at different fields. Now, just to acknowledge, one of the things that we discussed earlier is the issue of we are prohibited from revealing certain confidential proprietary information about different fields, about different economics. And so what we have done is we've tried to make the fields that we looked at, which were actual fields with actual data, and we kind of made them into a generic version so that we didn't reveal anything, but you can see the actual relationships that were discovered in terms of the impacts that different tax structures have on these real fields. And so that information is back there. There'll be folks back there to talk to you about what is provided there. And finally, the 3rd station is back in the corner on this side, and that's going to talk about the tools that we discussed that are being added by ACES and why they're needed, to go into more details about why those things are being included and the experience that we've had that generated our recognition that these are tools that we need to add to the law. And so with that, recognize that if you have a particular question that you don't believe necessarily fits into one of these, come up to the front. Marcia and probably I'll be up here and others And we'll be able to talk to you in general about ACES. We have some of the charts up here that just talk about the different structures that we have outlined above, and also point you if there's a particular one of these stations that would answer your question directly to that one. So I think right now, I'd like to open it to questions about the structure. If you have questions about ACES, let's have that in the smaller group. Any questions about what we're actually doing? Oh. Oh, actually, I think that's a specific question. Well, I think that's a specific question for the tools. I'm asking, do you have any questions that are about what the structure is tonight? If you have a particular question about the tools, then that'll be the station over there.
Has the oil companies had any input in putting this together, ACES?
Yes, we talked a lot to the companies as we were developing this in terms of their experience with PPT, their experience with some of the cost data, trying to get more information from them about why the cost data.
Are they happy with what you've come up with?
Well, I think clearly from the public discussion, well, I think, let's take a step back. Would you expect if the state was saying that we're going to impose a new system that's going to result in the state getting upwards of, depending on the price of oil, between $500 million and maybe $1 billion more than what the companies would get if the state hadn't changed the rules? Are they going to be happy about that? No. And
I would think that if we were getting a fair deal and they were getting a fair deal, they would be elated.
Well, I think the question that you have when you talk about fair, let's talk about from if you were in a situation where you could get extra from the other guy. Do you think that you would do that?
If I was going to get a long-term fair deal, I'd want the long-term fair deal. You can either get a sweet pickle or a dill pickle. I'd rather have the sweet pickle.
Well, I think that's a legitimate question to ask what's going on with the public debate and whether or not we're basing it upon the facts and about what is really going to be the impact on the industry and whether or not it's going to result in a good deal for them or not. And I think what we're trying to do is ensure that as we move through the public discussion of this issue, that we try to stick to the facts and stick to the true numbers and not get into the rhetoric of whether or not we're taxing too much or too little, because those general concepts aren't going to help. We'll stick to the facts of whether or not this is actually going to drive investment out of the state and how it's going to actually affect particular investments. So I think with that, why don't we offer to move you into the different stations, and we'll reconvene in those stations, and the folks at those locations will get settled and begin the presentation in a small group.
Yeah, I'm mom and dad are have the 13 years. You're not great.
Hey, how are you?
I'm tired. PTA workshops.
Think in terms of the political risk associated with the region that has the oil reserves.
Strictly political risk, strictly political risk.
It's mainly political, and that's what it's mainly getting at. It's not geological risk. And so if you think about the size of the reserves, that's what this vertical axis is. So the size of the circles represents the volumes associated with the country, and the country's name is